and how he's failed so many times. He's heard more no's than yes.
If you believe we can change the narrative, if you believe we can change our communities, if you believe we can change the outcomes, then we can change the world. I'm Rob Richardson. Welcome to Disruption Now. Welcome to Disruption Now. I'm your host and moderator, Rob Richardson. With me is Yaya Mbaoua, who is with Zensi, the founder, coming from Africa. What country in Africa?
Well, I'm in Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa.
Okay. Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa, and talking about his telemedicine and in combination with blockchain technology. So some really innovative things. And we're honored to have him on the show to hear about the cutting edge things that he's doing and really kind of talk about the growth opportunities that we're seeing really in Africa and across the world and how this is a new horizon for growth. So Yaya, welcome to the show. Welcome to Disruption Now, man.
Well, thanks for having me, Rob. It's a pleasure.
No, thanks for coming on. So I'm curious. So you're into you're starting a telemedicine kind of company to help match potential patients with doctors, if I'm correct. How did you get down this path of getting involved in this sector in general? Like, what sparked you just to get involved with this and solve this specific problem? When I'm sure you're an entrepreneur that had many ideas, why was this the idea that you had to go with?
Yeah, so I used to live in the US for nearly 20 years, and I just came to Africa 5 years ago. And while I was in the US, it was in the year 2006. My mother passed away in Cameroon, Africa, and she was actually in a hospital in a rural area, and she had a heart attack. She actually had a stroke, I would say, actually. And so the doctor called me and said, there's really nothing we can do, and we need to take your mom to the next hospital where she might be able to get access to a specialist, right? And it's on her way to that major hospital that she passed, right? So my foray into healthcare technology was in 2011. So I used to work for a company called Med1 Healthcare in the DC area. And that's where I got to really discover telemedicine. It dawned on me that, had we had telemedicine, in Cameroon when my mother was sick, she might have been able to get access to a specialist without moving, because I think the pressure of travel might have had also an impact on her passing. So if she had a way to get connected to a specialist remotely, maybe her life might have been saved. And that's where I really realized that there are many other people in Africa that may need the technology to save their lives. And so I decided to come to Africa and working with a US-based telemedicine provider that wanted to expand their footprint in Africa. That's what actually brought me here to the continent. And while you're on the ground, you realize that the healthcare crisis really is humongous. I actually have a personal experience with how hard it is to have access to a good doctor. I had a problem with my elbow. It was bursitis. It's like a little sort of ball that actually just appears on your elbow. And I went to an emergency room and to see a doctor, right? So the doctor seemingly didn't really know what it was. And so he said, well, we're going to have to do surgery, because, that's typically what happens when, and sometimes doctors in this part of the world, it's actually more of a commercial play for them, because they want to maximize the gain for the hospital. So he just said, okay, we need to have.
It's not that different in the US. It's just a little more regulations, but go ahead.
Yeah. But I noticed in his body language that he wasn't quite comfortable, or he didn't quite know what it was. So I called a friend in the US and I described the problem to him. And so he knew right instantly what I had. So he said, well, listen, absolutely no surgery. Just wait for a few days and just subside, you'll be fine. So that really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, it's really important to speak to the right doctors when you're sick. And many people actually here on the continent are suffering from, misdiagnosis like that. And I thought that, well, and I asked around and realized that, there were many other victims of that issue. And that's why I thought about, maybe to put together a solution where we connect patients here in Africa with doctors, well, the best doctors we can find, even within Africa or outside of Africa, to help those patients out. So that's actually what brought us to here where we are.
Yeah, I mean, you really tell it well when you talk about a founder that is connected and understands the problem that they're trying to solve. You had it with your mother, and then you've had it with yourself personally. What are your challenges here with making sure that people actually have the connection?
Yes, since you touched on infrastructure, not human resources, but infrastructure, it's a real problem. I think, it's a problem that has been stated for years. But the reality is that things are changing. The internet penetration varies, from country to country. As you know, Africa, there are 54 countries, and the penetration varies by country. So in Cote d'Ivoire, for example, where I am, internet penetration is estimated at maybe between 45 and 47%.
Right.
When you go out east in Kenya, it's nearly at 65%. So that's massive, right?
Yeah.
I think, even if it's not at 100%, you still have, half of the population that are connected. Certainly in major cities, you have better connections, but in secondary cities, that are not as large as these major cities, internet connectivity is still pretty good. So you have at least, 4G, 3G level, connectivities. And I think it's well known now that, mobile penetration, smartphone penetration in African countries is really skyrocketed. So which means, for the most part, connectivity is really not an issue anymore. But, the reality is that, things are really significantly improving across the continent in terms of internet connectivity, for sure.
So then how are you, what is your process for going about connecting and going out and finding potential users? I mean, you've stated kind of where they are, they're going to be in major cities. So how do you go about, I guess, advertising or marketing in Africa to make sure that, or in the countries in Africa that you're targeting, to make sure that you're connecting with the right customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, so it's a mobile app, right? So people actually have to use a mobile app to sort of, see what doctors are available, book an appointment with them, and have video consultation, right? So, and that requires people to be able to use, apps. So, and that's really not a problem. And most of these people are on Facebook, they're on WhatsApp, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter. So we use social media significantly to spread the word. And so we use local radio stations as well. And so we have an offer for the general public, and we also have an offer for employers and organizations like nonprofit organizations. So we also target those organizations to provide access to their employees or their members, right? So we do a mix of media, radio communications, on the ground, community events, and things like that to be able to reach out to people.
So what does success look like? You're here, 5 years in the future with ZenC. What do you hope is on the wall in terms of measurables that your company has established and you can take back as that you see as significant as in meeting your milestones?
So our projection in 5 years in terms of the vision we have for ZenC is to be a Pan-African virtual clinic, right? So the thinking is that, we want to remove the borders and just make sure that if you're a patient in, let's say, Ghana, you're able to connect with a doctor in Nigeria or Kenya or South Africa, for that matter, who speaks, English, right, or your language. Or even doctors in the US, why not, or Canada. If you're a patient in Cote d'Ivoire, you'd be able to actually connect with doctors in Cameroon, Senegal, Mali, French-speaking countries, or France. So our idea is to sort of build this borderless, service where, you just an African patient and forget about the country you live in. If you're sick, you need to talk to a doctor. There's going to be a doctor somewhere around the world who's accessible. You can connect with them and have a consultation. So that's our vision for ZenC.
How do you work to make sure that you become a trusted source? Because when you talk about healthcare, you're really talking about people investing their trust in you. There's nothing more important than your health. and nothing more private or precious than your health. How does your company go out to make sure to tell people that you're looking out for their interests? What do you do to make sure that they understand that you have that perspective?
So first of all, we communicate clearly or transparent, in a transparent manner about how we protect their medical records. I think it's really important. At the beginning, sometimes where people were saying, well, that's something that actually applies to the Western world. But here in Africa, and even there are regulators that are more and more applying the requirement of protecting patients' records. I think that's really key. So the other thing also is that we want to put patients at the center of what we do. So empowering them to choice, to choose the doctors that they want to talk to, they want to work with. And based on previous experience with other patients, let's say other patients who've seen a doctor will actually provide some reviews and ratings of their experience with the doctor to sort of put the next patients at ease in connecting with a certain doctor. And so you can actually see what other patients have said about their experience with the doctor before connecting with them. And ultimately, though, the relationship between patients and doctors is such that once you're comfortable with the doctor, you're likely to stay with the doctor, right? So we build that framework where a patient actually have a sort of a family doctor, even if they're not local, they can be anywhere, across the world. But you have that relationship built between the patient and the doctor for follow-ups and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I really think COVID helped with this, because it's. I've said this many times that COVID was a short-term disruptor, but it was more accurately described as an accelerator of trends. Like we're doing a virtual interview. You're in Africa, I'm here in the United States of America, but we're able to connect just as much. And so I do think this will help with that. Have you found any challenges of just of barrier challenges between the understanding of cultures between Africa and America, very different cultures? How do you go over, because there has to be something to appreciate the cultural differences and how to navigate through that. Like, how do you advise your American counterparts that you're working with? And then on the other side, how do you talk and work through folks in Africa when you're working with Americans or just Europeans?
I mean, I think you make a great point about COVID, and obviously it's actually sort of made the world much smaller, and people actually have gotten accustomed to communicating with people across the world. That's perfectly the case now, and still there's still some cultural differences that we need to take into account. For example, here. Patients have been used to, I think it's been the case in the US as well before COVID, right? Where patients have been used to going to the hospital, they want to be touched by the doctor to feel that they've actually had a proper consultation, right? The US has actually gone over that hump, right? So, and Africa is in its way there. There's still some kind of resistance or difficulty for people to really understand that it's really possible for a doctor to consult with you remotely. So there's that education process that actually is ongoing right now. And also, there's also this notion of subscription. Say, for example, you ask people to subscribe to the service. People are not likely to actually let you tap into their, credit card every month. It's not in the culture. So which means that sometimes what you need to do is just make sure that you get them to renew their subscription every month.
That's so a lot more work.
It is a lot more work, but you have to work with that, and it's just culturally not accepted to do that. And also the reality of the market is that, people here pay less for health services than the US, right? And so US doctors usually would come in higher premium for their consultations. So now, so the way to bridge that gap is to explain, first of all, to the US, doctors that we work with that, all right, locally, these are the rates that apply for consultations. So we're not going to ask you to actually abide by that, those numbers. but you need to actually be a little bit more flexible in bringing your price down. And so, which means that sometimes, we would ask doctors in the US to add a level of let's say, philanthropy, pro bono to the consultation. And we've talked to many doctors of the African diaspora, doctors of African descent. As you know, there are many doctors in the US, originally from Africa, Nigerians, Ghanaians, and so on. But those doctors, because of the fact that they've left the continent and there aren't enough doctors on the continent to take care of the patients, there is an element of guilt in their minds that they should have been there to help the people. So for that reason, they're willing to do something extra, to do something. I wouldn't say pro bono, but actually reduce the price to meet the buying power of the population in Africa. So these are some of the things that we need to do to establish that bridge between U.S. doctors and patients in Africa.
Just thinking about general investment in Africa overall, there's a lot of opportunity for growth there.
Yeah.
As we have a lot of a mostly American audience, what would you tell them just about the growth opportunities for general investment? It could be in healthcare or whatever you're seeing. Like what do you see on the ground for potential opportunities for growth and investment and return on capital?
Well, I think Africa, first of all, is a huge continent. So at least 1.2 billion people, right? So that's a huge market. And granted, it's not a monolithic country. So you have 54 countries. So which means that you're expected to do custom solutions as you go from country to country. However, there are some large markets like Nigeria, for example. I think there are many investment funds that are going into Nigeria, into Kenya. So there are some investment hubs that are actually establishing themselves as really conducive for American investors. One, it could be because it's a large market. That's the case for Nigeria, for example, because you have at least 200 million people in the country. It could be in all cases, in Kenya, for example, where the investment environment is actually very beneficial for foreign investors to come in and establish themselves, or even fund local businesses. Rwanda is the same thing, South Africa also. So for many reasons, depending on the country, there are always opportunities to invest. And in the French-speaking countries, for example, the interesting thing is that they all use the same currency. There are 14 countries using the same currency. So if you could target one, service for one country, chances are, it would apply to all 14 countries. And wow. That's a large market.
Wow. So I didn't know. So 14 countries use the same currency?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So in a related conversation, let's talk a little bit about blockchain. Right. Because you're about to, you said your business is going to integrate blockchain technology. Tell us about where you see the opportunities here with blockchain in healthcare. I think a lot of folks just probably wouldn't inherently see that, but I'd love to hear your perspective on where you see the opportunity for blockchain in healthcare.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not looking at blockchain because it's a trend, because it's cool. I think right. I think one has to understand that the reason we're looking at blockchain is because the application of blockchain in healthcare is going to be really tremendous in managing medical records for patients. Right. I think it's important to ensure that there's that element of trust that you mentioned earlier in terms of how the patient shares their medical records with the provider. When they go from provider to provider, there has to be that comfort both on the patient and the provider side, that and that trust that the data that I'm actually sharing is being shared with someone that I grant access to, and so on. And also, it's important to ensure that the records are portable, right? So when you go from patient to patient, from provider to provider,
I never thought about it that way. Yeah, go ahead. They'll finish. I mean, I can see the opportunities for blockchain, making it portable but secure.
So essentially, that's what it is. That you can actually, because one of the reasons why there's malpractice is because sometimes doctors may not have, especially on a platform like ours, the doctor may not have the history, the medical history of the patient, right? So and you need to be able to have the framework for the patient to sort of carry their medical records or their medical history with them as they connect with the next doctor, to make it available to them so that they can have access to that history and be better prepared to do the proper diagnosis. That's how we see the application of blockchain on our platform.
Yeah, there's this balance as you think about data being implemented, but also needing to be shared while also protecting privacy. Like, because the more data we have, the more things we can prevent, right? Because if we have data, we can build it into a system that can predict when they've seen this. You can do what I've seen is doppelganger predictor, which is somebody like has a similar profile that you've had, and you can tell that person by enough data. So I can see a world, it just has to be a world where people begin to trust a little more, but that where we can have things on the blockchain, and it shares not the data about the person, but it maybe shares some data about a pattern of illnesses and things that have happened, and that we can learn from that and grow from that. Like, I see an area, I just thought about this, where you can really combine artificial intelligence and the blockchain to really build a comprehensive type of system to really, I think, provide more impact. Because in the future, then it can come up and generate, like, it can really predict if, it's just somebody that looks just like Rob Richardson, our doppelganger. And you've had these conditions. We know that this works, and we know these things generally do not work. Could definitely change the world in terms of healthcare outcomes. I never really thought about it till you just brought it now, but I can see that. I really can.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, AI. We actually use AI currently, although it's actually provided by a third party for now. So the thinking behind the use of AI is just to kind of, guide patients to the proper doctor. So you come in, and then obviously you can actually, checking your symptoms, and we can actually evaluate the symptoms. I mean, through AI, evaluate your symptoms and algorithmically determine what illnesses you might have, and steer you to the right doctors, right? But so what we want to do is actually go beyond that, where so using the results from the AI, engine to sort of provide some diagnosis support or recommendations to the patient, to the doctor. So when you schedule an appointment with the doctor, so we'll actually share that report with the doctor, so they can actually see what recommendation the AI system actually makes to sort of help them either quickly diagnose the patient or maybe adjust their diagnosis and ensure that, we get to some level of care that is acceptable. So there's a combination of AI and how we want to sort of couple that with blockchain in that sort of handoff. That's really interesting for us to look into in the future.
No, I think it's a great idea. I think the challenge will continue to be, how do we build trust? Really having that empathy to understand that folks are going to have that perspective, and some are going to be resistant to technology because they feel like it's going to be some way now people can track them, or it's going to be something that is going to hurt them. I mean, I do think that's still a challenge within the U.S. And I imagine that's a challenge in Africa. And I don't know if there's been any experiences you've had with that have helped you bridge the gap for your potential users. I'd be curious.
Yeah, so I know it's more of a challenge in the U.S. than it is in Africa. Let me explain why. It's not that people are not as educated here about the privacy of the data, but it's just that people are more concerned about getting help from a doctor, getting medical help. So that's lacking tremendously. So and people may be willing to actually expose their data to get the help they need. So think about someone who, let's say, for example, here in Cote d'Ivoire, there are 4 million sickle cell disease patients, right? But there are only 12 specialists. So what that means is that if you're a sickle cell patient in Cote d'Ivoire, chances are you're going to have to wait for weeks, to be able to talk to a specialist, right? Now, if you're given a chance to talk to one today, and even if you're likely to lose your privacy, the bottom line is you want to be alive, you want to be healthy, you want to be fine. So you're going to prioritize that over protecting your medical records. I'm not saying that's not important, but I think in terms of urgency, people are more interested in getting medical help as quickly as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
So we've seen people on our Facebook page come and actually expose their medical situation openly, and that's because they are in dire need of medical support. But something you probably wouldn't see in the US.
Oh, okay, cool. Makes sense. All right, I got a couple of rapid fire questions to conclude us here. What's an important truth or conviction you have that a lot of people may not agree with you on?
People still think that they are, these are really impossible tasks that we're attempting to do. So being able to get, patients in Africa to connect with doctors, anywhere they want, is it legal? Is it feasible? I mean, there are so many hurdles, and it's really not worth it. But I think many people that we talk to just think it's impossible, and that is actually really, really hard. But we just disagree with that. I think we just have to fix it and make it possible. I think with technology, it's possible. And with the proper perseverance and talking to the right people, we can get things to change, gradually until the general public actually sees it as a normal thing. So that's what I would say.
All right, you have a committee of 3, living or dead, advising you on business or life. Who are the 3 people and why?
I have, in mind someone like Jack Ma from Alibaba. I've actually been following what he's been saying about, entrepreneurship and how he's failed so many times. He's heard more no's than yes.
Right. And it's part of the process.
It's part of the process. I think, he's definitely an inspiration. I think that I'm certainly inspired by someone like, Nelson Mandela, who I think that is not cliche, but I think most people will actually sort of listen to someone like that because of what he's gone through and how he actually sacrificed himself for the betterment of his people, of people in general. And also, he, after retention, he didn't, have any hard feelings against his oppressors, things like that. I think it's definitely an example to follow as well. Yeah.
Agreed.
So I think, so the third one.
If you don't have the third one, you can stay at 2. That's fine. That's
okay.
Fine. I'll take the pressure off you. Let's final question here. You have a saying or a Google billboard that is your saying in life. What does that say and why?
Feel better.
Okay.
Feel better, which is actually sort of related to our name, Zen. Zen-say, and because so we want to get people to feel better. We want to get people to live a healthier lifestyle and be taken care of when they're sick. So in general, we want people to feel better.
All right, feel better. Yaya, Yaya, it was great having you on, man. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right, me too. Thanks so much for having me, Rob.
Thank you.